Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another Aplos webinar. We're glad you're here with us. Just like as always, if you're joined us in the past, we just ask if you just type in the question box. Just a couple of you let us know that you can hear my voice and see the screen in front of you. That would be great. So just go ahead. Yep, good. Hello, Robert, Lisa. Great, good, excellent. So you've got sound, and we're going to get going right here. Good. All right. Welcome, everybody. So happy spring. Happy tax day. I think today is the day that you're supposed to have turned in your taxes. So what better thing to do on tax day than talk about fundraising and corporations and giving and all of that. I'm super excited about our webinar today. We're going to talk about some creating, building, and maintaining corporate partnerships. And we're just, again, super stoked that you took an hour out of your busy schedules to join us. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. We provide these webinars every month. Once a month, we do some kind of either fundraising or leadership type of opportunity for you to learn and grow and learn from each other. It's very interactive, and that we encourage you, if you use Twitter, you can do the hashtag Aplos webinar, or you can contact me directly at FugitiveDMK. My Twitter handle is right there on the screen. So feel free to interact during, after, whichever you feel. So of course, as you know, my background is in fundraising, so I love to talk about fundraising and hopefully give you very practical tips. Knowing and understanding that fundraising is a relationship business. So we talk a lot about relationships in and during our webinars. Just real quickly, just give you a little bit about Aplos. Again, if you know us and you use our products, great. You do not have to be an Aplos user to join our webinars. We provide these free to you as a service. We also have a ton of content on our website at aplos.com using our Academy button. If you go to the Academy, there's tons of past webinars and other kind of content. And for those of you who are going to ask during the Q&A, we do record all of our webinars. We'll make this available usually about a day, 24, 48 hours after this. We'll make this available for you to either play again or show to other people and all of that. So that is also available. But one of the exciting things going on at Aplos besides our accounting software is we are just weeks away from releasing our brand new donor management software. So for those of you who are still using Excel spreadsheets or kind of confused about how to track your donors, stay tuned. Hopefully you'll be keeping track of us as we get ready to launch an exciting donor management product that's really going to help you build better relationships with your prospects and donors. So we're super excited about that. So with that, let's get right in. We're going to do some Q&A at the end. But I'm super excited about our guest today. I'm not going to introduce him yet because I'm going to keep you waiting because it's so exciting. But if you read our intro and you signed up, you know that corporations and businesses are hugely important to every community, not just economically, but also for the value that they can bring to your nonprofit organization. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the value of having a strong corporate partnership with your organization or even your church. We're going to be joined in just a couple minutes by Tim Rios, who's the Senior Vice President for Wells Fargo. He's community and government relations, and he'll tell you a little more about that. But what we want to do is kind of focus on how to start some corporate partnerships, looking beyond just sponsorships, some success stories, and then maybe some tips for creating long-term relationships. So even though we're going to talk a lot about Wells Fargo and the way that they give, hopefully you'll learn about that this can translate to other types of partnerships with corporations and businesses in your community. One of the reasons why I went with Tim is because I think Wells Fargo as a company really exemplifies how to really work well with nonprofits locally. But before we do that, I want to remind people, if you've listened to webinars with us in the past, we talk a lot about individual relationships. And we know that of the $373 billion, yes, that's billion with a B, that's given out to charity nationally, we know that the majority of that comes from individuals, 71%. In fact, if you look at the graph on the screen, you'll notice that individuals is the biggest pot, next by foundations, and then also requests. And then very, very bottom, only 5% of giving in the United States comes from corporations. Now, is that bad news? I would say no. Now, I think the point of this is that even though that's a smaller piece of the pie, there's still $18 billion that's given away annually in the United States by corporations, businesses, and it starts locally. So the good news here is that there should be space in your nonprofit's plan, in your annual plan, to work with some corporate partnerships. So I want to kind of keep that on the forefront. If you think, oh my gosh, we're never ever going to get any kind of money, we're too small or whatever, I'd encourage you to kind of think a little differently. So to kind of set the stage, just again, remember that corporate partnerships are important. They can help you become more visible. It's important that you know and understand your community before you approach your corporate partners, meaning that, if let's say that you decided you wanted to go after Firestone Tires as a corporate partner, but there's no Firestone Tires in your region, that's probably not a good idea. So it's good that you understand your community, find out who's headquartered there, find out the big businesses, find out the small ones, find out who's giving to who. And I really want to kind of start off by saying that local businesses can be just as powerful as big headquarters, meaning you might not have a large corporate headquarters. The Central Valley, where Aplos is located here in the center of California, we don't necessarily have large headquarters located here like an Amazon or somebody like that, but we have a lot of very strong businesses and chains of business who will get together and support your nonprofits. And then nextly, just want to encourage you that relationships matter. So it's not just a matter of just picking up the phone and cold calling, but it's my guest is shaking his head. But it's about growing and developing relationships the same way you would with a prospect or a big donor. And then lastly, I want to just say, do your homework. It's really important that you find out who's giving, what they're giving to, and that those corporations match your interests. And then just lastly, before we get into the kind of the meat of today, just want to say that think about other ways to involve corporate partners besides just asking for money. Of course, the most common thing is sponsorships. And actually, those in some ways can be the hardest because sponsorship dollars are changing quickly. Donations, of course, grant programs. A lot of corporations have an actual formal grant program where you can apply for money at certain times of the year. Company match programs are a powerful way to get involved with your corporations. And what that basically is, if you're new to that term, that is where a company will match employees' giving. So if employees give $50, they'll match that dollar for dollar and give that to your organization. A lot of banks like Wells Fargo, who's here today, do that. Power companies, United Ways, things like that. Another great way to involve corporate partners is getting them on your boards and advisory boards, board of directors. Get input from them because corporations have a real sense of what's going on in the community. Volunteers and mentors, great way to get that. Organizations like Habitat for Humanity and the home building programs and the food banks are wonderful examples of people that use corporate volunteers. Cause-related marketing programs. I'm not going to talk a lot about that today for sake of time, but what that is if you might go into a local store like a Costco or a 7-Eleven, and they have an opportunity to donate to a local charity. You give $1 and that dollar goes to a local charity. That's a cause-related marketing program. And then guest speakers, tapping into alumni. Maybe there's corporate representatives that came out of your nonprofit or experienced that. For example, locally, we have a food bank here locally. Well, one of their board members one of the reasons she serves on that board, and she is from a company here in our community, is because when she was young, her family received the benefits of a local food bank. And that's a very powerful message in your community. So just kind of some ways to involve. So as we kind of move forward. So now to the action. Want to welcome Tim. I'm not going to read his bio. You can read it right there, and it will be available for you. But I just want to say that I'm super thrilled to have Tim Rios here with us today. Tim, like you see in the bio, is the Senior Vice President for Wells Fargo. I've had the privilege and pleasure of working with Tim in the nonprofit space for at least 10 years, if not more. So, Tim, welcome.
Thank you, Dan. Happy to be here.
Good. So it's a great honor to have you. And so, Tim, just to kind of get things going, why don't you tell us a little bit about your position at Wells Fargo and how you got here? Who are you?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dan. First of all, thank you for the invitation to be here with you. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of you because of the relationship that we had in past. But yeah, no. Well, my trajectory, is I started in banking right out of college and did commercial banking, small business banking. I started out actually as a new accounts person at a small local bank. And just about 20 years ago, I had the opportunity to join Wells Fargo, and I call it doing the best job in the world. I started as a what they call a community affairs officer, looking after the reputation of Wells Fargo in our communities, giving. And today I have the pleasure of managing a team of Wells Fargo community relations leaders and philanthropists who are doing some great things in their communities, along with the rest of our business line teams. And so it's really the best job in the world.
Great. Okay.
Although you would also say yours is the best job in the world.
It is now. That's great. And growing up, you grew up. Tell us a little bit about that.
I actually grew up in Mexico, and we immigrated into the United States, and right off the bat, did our best to learn English and get through school. I actually met my wife working at McDonald's when we were 18, and have two wonderful kids, and here we are today.
Good. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So, Tim, tell us a little bit more about Wells Fargo's giving programs and the philosophy behind that, because as I said, after being on the other side of the coin, being in fundraising for 20 years, Wells Fargo is one that I always know and had personal experience with as being very philanthropic as a company. Yeah. Can you tell us about that?
Thank you, Dan. And we take a lot of pride in that. Our philosophy is pretty simple, and that is that we believe that we can't be successful unless our communities are successful, and that carries over into our philanthropy. And so, on the one hand, we are sometimes everything to everyone. I think we've invested dollars all across the board, but in the more recent future, we take make very thorough assessments of our communities, including the most pressing needs. Obviously, a lot of those needs that we focus on have to do with people's financial futures, such as organizations and nonprofits that are helping people buy their first home, start a small business, for example, skill up to get a better, higher paying job, teaching kids and adults financial education. But beyond that, we also work a lot with everything from hospitals to K through 12 schools to youth organizations. So it's all across the board. And a lot of our philosophy is shaped by the needs of the markets where those budgets are.
Okay. Nationally, right? We're
nationally.
Okay.
Nationally.
And do you happen to know, I didn't ask you this ahead of time, do you know how much Wells Fargo gives away annually to nonprofit? Because I believe I read recently that you were one of the top, not you, Tim, but Wells Fargo.
We are. Last year, $281 million.
Wow.
So
Congratulations.
Thank you. In the last 3 years, close to $1 billion.
Great.
And what's great, Dan, is that in our company, although we do have some national and super regional grant programs, our local markets, we live in Fresno down to the city, our local teams are able to determine where those needs are in our communities.
Okay.
So it's not just a big corporation deciding where the needs of Fresno or the needs of Los Angeles or the needs of Phoenix Arizona or Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's the Wells Fargo team members who are there who make those decisions, and that's critical.
Great, excellent. Tell us a little bit about maybe highlight or share a couple of partnerships or projects that you are most proud of.
Well,
it's probably a tough question.
That's a tough question, but I'll tell you some that stand out are our work with what they call the community development financial institutions. These are organizations that help small businesses that don't qualify for bank financing obtain the loans they need to. The small business owners need to grow and start their businesses. And just this past year, we started a program called Diverse Community Capital, specifically aimed at investing and giving to those organizations to help more businesses get started. So that's one that stands out. It's a national program, but it's creating thousands of loans through these organizations to small businesses that otherwise wouldn't have that funding. And another one that comes to mind just here locally is our work with local children's hospital. We always have 300 to 400 volunteers that are out there selling these great newspapers that are ultimately helping kids, which brings up something that you said earlier, Dan, about the importance of going beyond the dollars. That our team also takes great pride in volunteering our time, whether it's teaching a financial education class in a school, or building a house, or selling newspapers to benefit a children's hospital locally.
Yeah. So for those of you who are listening that are like, what's this deal about selling newspapers? Here in the Central Valley where Aplos is located, our local children's hospital, Valley Children's, has a pretty unique fundraising program where on one day of the year, they designate it as Kids Day. The Fresno Bee, which is our local paper, does a special edition newspaper, does some feature stories about the hospital, and then volunteers literally stand on street corners and sell this newspaper for $1.
Exactly.
It's a little ironic that I'm talking about it because I actually worked at Children's for about 8 or 9 years and ran the program, so I'm very familiar with it. But so that's what Tim is referring to. But literally, thousands of volunteers get out there, and the corporations are a big part. In fact, they have a corporate challenge where there's a contest to see what companies can raise the most money in the short amount of time. So
exactly. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So once again, if you're think about some questions you're going to have, because at the very end we'll do some Q&A. Feel free to reach out to us on Twitter using the hashtag Aplos Webinar, and then I am at Fugitive DMK. You can tweet your questions if you hear anything that just change your life just now that Tim just tweet it out there.
Probably not that.
Yeah, maybe not that, but yeah. So what advice can you give someone who's looking to form a corporate partnership with Wells Fargo, or really any company? Where do you start? And we have a lot of small nonprofits who are like, where do I even begin?
Yeah. Well, then a couple things. First is, you mentioned the importance of relationships, and it really does have to do with relationships. But a good starting point is, I know with our company, certainly visiting one of our branches and asking if there's contact for a community relations officer or manager nearby. Most of our offices have that. But beyond that, I think getting in front of the person who actually deals with, the requests of organizations is important. Sometimes if you go into you may go into one of the branches or stores of a corporation and they may not have any knowledge of these programs. It's important to start there. And usually websites will have some contact for what you're looking for, including maybe a tab that says, sponsorships or donations. That's a good place to start. Beyond that, starting in the relationship with someone is important, including keeping that person up to date on as to what's new, what's going on, what is the value proposition, and keeping close contact so that, not necessarily, every day, but it is true that, the squeaky wheel sometimes gets the attention. And I think if the cause is a good one and it's a genuine need in the community, and it also matches what corporations are looking for in their gifting, something could blossom there, and that would be fantastic.
That's good. That's good insight. I also think that, it's okay. When people ask me, as a previous fundraiser, suggestions, one of the things I do is look around your community and find out who's giving. Look at other events. I mean, fundraisers, if you're a good fundraiser, one of the things you do is you not only steal ideas, but you find out who's giving, and you'll start to see a trend in our community here in Fresno, California. One of the things that stands out often is Wells Fargo's name, whether that's a local, business event. We talked about Children's Hospital, Fresno State, and a lot of the small organizations. I see Wells Fargo, so that is a credit to what you guys are doing. But as a fundraiser, it's an important tool to use, is to find out who is and isn't giving. So just, I'm just kind of taking a guess here that you probably get more requests than you have dollars to give. That's just a wild guess. What is the decision process for you or your team? And who do you give? How do you decide?
Yeah.
Is it the squeaky wheel?
Not nowadays, Dan, especially and I'm just going to focus on this community because it's that's where I live, which is also important, by the way. We have 750 Wells Fargo employees, team members who live here. So definitely, a corporation where they have a lot of employees or team members that work there, chances are that the company has a pretty decent giving program there too. But, there was a time when I started that we would approve almost everything because few people knew about the Wells Fargo Foundation. Nowadays, we have a committee that makes those decisions. And so normally the way we work that is that a certain percent, say 30, 35%, goes to what we call our 4 pillars, affordable housing, small business, job creation, and financial education, Dan. And the other 70% goes to this myriad of causes. And what we look for is, organizations that are leading programs that are hopefully innovative and progressive, maybe reaching populations that have been underserved historically. And also, I think it's important to look for organizations that have programs where your investment wouldn't just be a drop in the bucket, because it's not always encouraging to give $10,000 to something where you're trying to raise, 20 million. You feel as if your contribution could be best served with different organizations where maybe 10,000 could get them to another level, for example. And then I think the most critical for us is look for organizations that have the momentum and good leadership. No program of the organization is more important than its leaders and its leadership. And so looking for great people doing great things is probably, I would say the secret sauce for us, and that has worked so far. Yeah.
Sometimes it seems like when people request from a corporation and maybe they get no the first time and maybe get no a second time, they give up. Seems like the idea is, don't necessarily give up, right?
Yeah, don't give up. Don't give up, Dan. But also, that's where it's super important that the organization, that the nonprofit, find out what the priorities of the foundation is, because it's possible to be declined 100 times if your needs don't match the priorities of the organization.
Yeah.
And I think for us, we go a lot based on, the track record. And the other thing too is how in order is the organization, its finances, leadership, strong board of directors, good governance. All of those things are important, and we look at those too. And the last thing is, you mentioned earlier the importance of maybe getting someone from a corporation on your board of directors, which is a great idea. And we also tend to invest where our folks are involved.
No.
The one I guess cautionary note is that for organizations to be picky and not just choose the first person from Wells Fargo or any corporation that raises their hands, because they may on occasion want it for the resume, where you really want a committed board member who's passionate for the cause, which is a lot more important than a few $1,000s that you might get.
Yeah, so it's a double-edged sword there. On the one hand, corporations are encouraging their employees to get out in the community. They can be great board members. On the other hand, exactly like you said, you don't want them just to be a on the paper, kind of thing. You mentioned something that I think is really interesting. I want to stay on that for a minute. And we've talked about this in our past webinars, which is, as an organization, it's important that you're seen as fiscally strong, that you have good leadership. And I can't emphasize or kind of re-emphasize what you said on that. It's interesting you said that because we've talked about that in some of our past webinars, and some of you might remember that is that, why do people give? Is it tax reasons? Hello, tax day. Not as much. I mean, we find that people give because, they have a personal story or they respect the leader. And I definitely have seen that. And so I'd really encourage you to have that conversation with your own board of directors as you're looking at that. So that's a great thing. What are some other ways nonprofits can partner with you besides just asking for money? And maybe we can translate this not just to Wells Fargo, but
Yeah. Well, there's a number of ways, Dan, and we already mentioned some of them.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, volunteerism, that's also big. We're also very proud of our volunteer hours, more than 1 million last year. Because we love getting our folks involved.
Mm-hmm.
And, the more engaged we have found that the more engaged our team members are in their communities, the better they are in their jobs at Wells Fargo. So it's a great win for the community and for us as well. Obviously, boards of directors are others, but beyond that is this notion of advisory boards. If your organization needs sounding boards and you don't have formal board members that you need, and maybe because the commitment is less, wrapping some of our team or wrapping the teams of other corporations in just for advisory board capacity might be a good idea as well. And probably the other way that we've been useful to organizations here is introducing them to other funders. And we've had a lot of success there. So that
Good point.
So if we are investing, and even if we're not, we're always thinking of who can we introduce this organization to where they might have success with funding. And that's another way we get involved.
Great. Good. So how would you say corporate giving's changed since you started or over the years? I mean, I have some ideas, but I'd love to hear.
Yeah, well, that's a good question, Dan. I would say for us, the biggest way is that we are a lot more focused in our giving for the most pressing needs of the community, but also, and I think this will be something that your listeners have heard before, the need for foundations to have partners who can produce impact, and impact has become the big buzzword. There's difference between outcomes and impact, but this notion of how is it changing? We know we're not going to solve society's ills with our giving, but we do want to work with organizations that are creating some change. And so I think for us, the biggest change is that we're investing in more money with less organizations and trying to not be everything to everyone, but being more choosy about those organizations that are truly having impact and those organizations that know how to measure the impact that they're having. And the other way that it's changing is that foundations are looking for organizations that are creating stories. That we are no longer interested so much in doing a big check presentation. Those big checks.
The big check. I could never get it. I could never get that into the ATM machine. So,
well, it's almost like going away from the big check.
Yeah.
And truly working with organizations that have programs that are creating impact that is sustainable.
Yeah.
So, which brings me to another point. Not to ask for money for programs where you're just gonna, get $50,000 one year, and if Wells Fargo can't fund you next year, the program's going to go away.
Yeah.
We want to invest in programs that are sustainable, and I think most foundations are also looking for that. These days.
Yeah, seems like sponsorships have changed a lot too. Can you talk about that? I mean, it seems like when I started in fundraising, that was the big thing, with everything from your gala to your golf tournament to this, and it feels like that corporations want a little bit. I want to say bang for their buck. Is that the right term, or is it?
Yeah, we still do galas and dinners and on occasion the golf sponsorship, although golf sponsorship's not nearly, what it used to be for us. But I think the reason it's changed is because, our teams have become more educated on the importance of supporting programs.
Yeah.
And in fact, a couple of years ago, we had a change to our internal policies about putting a lot more focus on the programs of an organization. So if you were going to support a dinner, for example, you would still give them the same amount of money, but you put it into programs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we just felt that it was, that we wanted to do something beyond showing up one night.
Yeah.
And many times we pair our grants with volunteer opportunities and other ways that our teams can get involved. Yeah. So it's more valuable for both sides.
Yeah. So as a practical takeaway for some of you listening, and by the way, Lisa, I see your question here, and we will do Q&A at the end, but thank you. And if for some reason I don't come back to it, just remind me. But I do see your question on there. But kind of on that same idea is that what I've seen nonprofits doing is they'll kind of package a gift in. So let's say I go to Wells Fargo and Wells says, well, we'll commit $25,000 to your organization for this program. But as part of that, they'll say then also for that, you'll be a sponsor. So they'll package their sponsorship in that. Is that something that still works, or is that, attractive?
Yeah, well, it can be, Dan. And, we pay those from separate ways. We pay the sponsorship separate from say a program grant, and we're very careful not to mix those two, mm-hmm. especially where Wells Fargo is getting benefit. But going back to your previous question that ties into this one, Dan, is that as a company, what I've noticed is that we're a lot less concerned about sort of, here's Wells Fargo, here's our big check, where's the picture, where's the story. Mm-hmm. And this is really a great change that I've really appreciated, this notion of taking our role more as community stewards than as just getting out there and getting a front page story. And that's been refreshing, as a longtime employee of Wells Fargo, and it seems more authentic, at least to me.
Yeah. Do you? I'm going to put you on the spot, and to be transparent, I did give Tim some of these questions ahead of time, so he's not totally off. But I did tell him I might throw in one or two. Did you find that when the economy goes up and down, does the giving go up and down, or do you guys try to stay stable with that?
Dan, I'm happy to say that our giving has not gone down.
That's great.
Our giving has not gone down, and people have asked if it did go down, especially during the recession, especially during the housing crisis. It didn't. It didn't. So we're very proud of that.
Good.
And one thing that I with the economy being what it is, as long as our giving is stable, one thing that I talk with my team about is if we have resources and we have the ability to go out and find great partners, and there's nothing getting in the way of us doing what we need to do. And so far the company has allowed us to, keep our budgets where they are, even on some occasions slight increases, especially to markets that maybe have been underserved. And that's been fantastic.
Great. What's interesting about that comment, is that nationally, even with individuals, trends are giving continues to go up even during the recession. So when things are bad, it does not necessarily mean a dip in giving. So it's encouraging to hear that some corporations feel the same way, and then of course we can't say that for everybody because the economy is the economy and places close. And, look at, you see some large retail businesses that are closing now that were good givers a few years ago. That's, but that's great to hear. What advice can you give smaller nonprofits regarding getting on the radar of a corporate giving program? We talked about this a little bit, but, because we do, a lot of our Aplos customers tend to be small shops or are maybe new 501c3s. How do they get out there? How do they get on the radar?
Yeah, well, Dan, good question. It goes back to relationships. And, along the same lines, I do want to say that, for example, in our city here, a city of 500,000 people, our average grant size is about $6,000. So that is not, you wouldn't consider that, major gifts to big organizations. So I guess what I mean by that is that we have a lot of small organizations already on our radar. And we even do, in some of our regions, breakfast, or we do $1,000, and all of the organizations are small. So we have a really good mix, which makes us probably more popular with smaller organizations. But definitely lead with relationships and stories. That's critical. And what I would suggest also to your listeners is if there's an opportunity to invite someone from the corporation to come and see some interaction with the end user, the person that uses the services, and see in action the benefit that is being provided, that's a game changer. because once you experience that, you get a much better feel than just seeing something on paper. So that connection between the funder and the end recipient is critical. And it doesn't always work, but I know that it's helped our team, and it's really helps me really get a sense of what the organization does.
Yeah.
And its people, and how wonderful its people are.
Yeah, relationships.
Exactly.
Right. It's encouraging to hear talk about storytelling, because that is so, that's so really become a part of the fiber of fundraising these days. In fact, and we've talked about this in past webinars, that if you were to Google nonprofit storytelling, you'll get literally hundreds of hits now, more than ever before. In fact, there's storytelling conferences for nonprofits now, because they've identified that it's really not just about the bottom line. It is about the bottom line, but that a good story will go along with it. In fact, I just posted something on my blog yesterday about that, and you can actually go to my LinkedIn site and see that story. It was a believe it or not, it was a Lyle Lovett and a concert I went to, and he was a masterful storyteller. By halfway through the show, you kind of thought you were in his living room. Wow. The way he told the story. So I really appreciate you telling that a little bit. So let's move on to this a little bit. Once an organization is funded or has a partnership with Wells Fargo, what is important to you as a funder?
Yeah. Well, then for that the organization touches base with their folks is important, and that also that the organization follows through with some communication about what they did with the money, even if it wasn't a lot of money. And I think the communication and report, for example, some of our larger grants have reports that must be submitted, but for our larger grants, that's not a requirement. But it doesn't mean that the organization can't follow up with a note to say, your $5,500 helped us give, 11 scholarships to these kids, and then a picture of the ceremony or whatever. That's important, and you stay on the radar, and you get some sense of follow through. What I would caution against is organizations that have built a relationship with a corporation and then feel that as the years progress, that they can sort of do less with their request, or maybe not keep the same attention, thinking that we're always going to be in, we don't have to put much effort into the relationship. We see that sometimes where the request gets thinner and thinner, and finally, someone's asking for $30,000 with a half a page, and we realize, okay, this organization is they're taking this too lightly now. So I think it's important for organizations to treat the relationship, give it its time that it needs to foster it, to keep in contact with the funder, keep them informed, so that when your request comes in the next year, that funder immediately recognizes you as a solid group. Yeah,
that's a really great point about stewardship. We've actually talked about stewardship and how you steward your donors. Well, you're a donor, Wells Fargo or whatever corporate entity, and how you communicate with them. I also heard once, and I thought this was great advice, and actually had to use it one time, which is when maybe there's something that isn't gone quite as expected. You gave money to something, and for whatever reason, the program wasn't going quite. To be very honest and transparent versus no surprises, right?
That's super critical, Dan. That's another very important. There's nothing more terrifying for a funder than to find out after the fact that their money was used for something else, and then that person needs to go explain it to their grants committee that the notification wasn't given for the change of use, and then it's you can almost kiss that relationship goodbye.
Yeah. That's a pretty interesting. It's a struggle for some, but I think it's really important, especially if there's something that's going to be a potential PR. Because things happen, right? They don't always go as expected.
But I want to say something about that too, and it's actually something that I started to use with some of the meetings that I have with grantees, especially those that we have great relationships with. I sometimes start a conversation with what's the least popular program that you have, but one of the most important.
Mm-hmm.
And that allows the organizations to say, okay, I'm going to be honest, this is not a fancy program, but it's a very much a needed program. Nobody wants to fund it because it's not flashy.
Mm-hmm.
Is this something Wells Fargo wants to help us with? And more often than not, we grant support with that.
Mm.
And what that does is that it places the importance on what the organization sees as its greatest needs versus, me coming in and saying, we want to fund this or that. And then, and you also, it helps to prevent that organization from thinking, we're going to use some of the money for this less popular program.
Yeah.
It's great to get funding right out of the gate for that program. And make sure that the funder knows that that's where the use is the greatest, where the need is the greatest.
Yeah. So kind of along the same lines, and maybe it's a bit repetitive, but what is the best way to ensure positive results for a nonprofit and you as a corporate partner once you've entered into an agreement to work together?
That communication.
Okay.
The communication and the relationship. And not so much that it's overboard, but, checking in at least once a quarter to say, I'd love to have coffee for 20 minutes, 30 minutes and give you an update on what happened with the funding, a story that was created, send pictures. Those are great. And the reason that is because my team, for example, has reporting that they do. And they love to put pictures about what their organizations are doing, especially if it's innovative or creative. So by providing that information, you're making that person's job easier for them to be able to report back. And some greatness happens when the people in the field float those stories up. And there may be someone in corporate, PR or someone who says, we should do more with that group if they're creating these kinds of stories. So you might see the interest in your program grow as it's circulated, across the company lines. And that's magical when that happens.
That's great. I was going to comment. Well, one of the things that I think was interesting, what you said was talking about that relationship. And one of the things we find with donors is that donors get a little tired of always feeling like people just want their checkbooks. So you as a corporate giver, you're in the community. It sounds to me like it's nice for you from time to time just to get a phone call from somebody to say, how's it going? Or learn about another program and not just, hey, when's that next funding cycle kind of thing, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And I'll say something about that too in terms of keeping in contact. I think there's a way to do development so that it doesn't seem so much like development. And I don't want to put you on the spot, Dan, but when you and I worked together, you had a way of approaching our organization in a way that was very low pressure, where you were able to get your point across about your most important programs without that pressure or without the strict deadlines. And we were more open to that. And so I think and maybe that's just your natural style, but I think it's important for development directors to adopt a style that is where you can still ultimately get that signature at the bottom line, but not make the person feel like that maybe lay off on the pressure a little bit. That helps.
That's good. That's really good. Thank you for that. I mean, that for me, one of the fun parts about development is the people, getting to know the people. And many times some of the corporate volunteers, board members who became friends and who are friends,
right,
and eventually became donors, aside from those corporate representatives. So I think that's great. So what would you say, so besides your role with Wells Fargo, you've served on a number of nonprofit boards and foundations. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you've learned from those experiences as a board member and as a foundation funder, even?
Yeah.
And you don't have to talk about the foundation itself.
Yeah. Well, no, I had the privilege of serving on a number of boards, more than a couple dozen in my professional career. But it's a great experience. I mean, what can I tell you? It's to be able to sort of look behind the curtain of the organizations, the finances, the really setting the direction for organizations. It's a lot of fun. So it's now when serving also on a major on the board of a major foundation has also taught me how to bring some of those strategies back and implement them in our own foundation. They have some great practices, and I take what I learn in my job and I take it back to my board membership. But more importantly, what I learned there, the strategy to come back and say, guys, I think we should be doing things a little different, and those things work out. So I think it's been a great fit, and I got to say that the greatest fun has been serving on the boards of small organizations that are lean and mean, and where it's still very much about the mission of the organization, with a few people that are very committed, and that's a lot of fun. Yeah, very grassroots.
Yeah, and a lot of our Aplos, a lot of folks that tune into our webinars represent that market. In fact, of the 1.4 million nonprofits out there, the majority of them are small nonprofits. It's not, we get kind of overwhelmed by the big universities and the hospitals and the large staffs, but I think the heart and soul of nonprofit work is exactly what you're talking about.
Can I say one more thing?
Absolutely.
Dan, I want to say one more thing about that, especially when it comes to, say, if you were interested in getting a Wells Fargo team member. I think it's important for also nonprofits, the small ones, to know that some of our team members have no experience serving on boards. So I think and I think that goes for a lot of corporations, especially in smaller towns and cities where you don't have, senior folks who've been on boards for years and years. And I say that because there is a way to get those folks recruited to serve on boards in a way that's going to make them feel comfortable by saying, this board is a small board. It's, Robert's Rules of Order. You don't have to know all of that. We mostly want to, use your advice and learn from you and what you do and connect with your company. It's good to point that out because serving on boards per se can be scary, to our team members, and that sometimes keeps them away. But if the organization is able to communicate very clearly about the expectations of where our board meetings are, what the time commitment is, the expectations, it can be a lot more appealing for our folks if that information is put out front.
Good point. One of the things I was thinking of a little bit ago, and one of the questions I want to kind of reemphasize is that most corporations that have giving programs, meaning people like the Wells Fargos, where there's branches and headquarters and things like that, have a set of giving guidelines, meaning you go to their website or you meet with a local representative like yourself, and they'll tell you, look, these are 4 areas that are important to us. Education, financial literacy, whatever, right? And I think it's really important for you as a nonprofit leader that are tuning in to really do your homework, because there's nothing worse than, probably someone who you take a meeting and they say, well, we care about, I don't know, blind mice. We want to save the blind mice. And yet their priorities are like, no, we don't really, we care, but so I think it's really important that you do your homework out there, right?
Yeah, no, it's very important. And look, I think for our company, if you look at our guidelines, after reading them, you might get a sense that we fund everything, and that's why we get all types of requests. I think the reason we've done that, I believe, is because we've left it open because of our local foundation giving decision making, and we want to leave it open enough that if there are certain unique needs in a community, that we address those and we find some way to address them, and that we are not that we are not prohibited from trying to solve an issue or work on an issue if that is very unique to that community. And I think that's why they're purposely somewhat open. There are some things that we won't do, but you'll find that history would show that we do a lot of things that others will not do.
Good. And I think the takeaway on all of this is the relationship.
Exactly.
Just talking and getting to know. There's an interesting trend right now in the nonprofit world sector, which is there's a lot of pushback about this idea of what is and isn't considered funding administration or what they call program services versus the money it takes to run the organization. The biggest example that's out there is you go to Starbucks, it costs you $3.50 for that cup of coffee. well, somebody's got to, pay the barista, you got to pay the rent, got to pay, all of those things, but you don't want to pay for that. So in the nonprofit sector, there's this kind of feeling of a lot of nonprofits feeling like their hands are tied with that. Have you heard that, or is there a discussion about that? Can you add anything to that? Because I think it's a pretty interesting feeling going on right now.
Yeah. No, I hear you, Dan, and I think and I hope I'm addressing this the right way. And I think that's the reason that sometimes events and other galas and that sort of thing, golf tournaments, are important to organizations, because you get to raise unrestricted dollars that do go to keep the lights on and so forth. And so my answer to that would be that although we do prefer to work with target our help to programs, on occasion, obviously many occasions, general operating is fine with us too. I mean, there's nothing better than funding an organization that is doing great work, and we are simply giving, grants so they can do more of it. And look, we get that, that there is an expense associated with keeping the lights on and, stocking coffee in the break room or whatever. And I think that's part of it. Now, I think we're less open to it than maybe even, I would like us to be, but there's definitely a lot of general operating support. And I serve on the board of a large foundation that also believes that general operating sometimes is where you need to give to. And I've learned from that. So I get it. I get it.
So I think where a lot of nonprofits are responding is, if you're doing a good job telling your story, you're telling the impact, you're showing what the dollars are going for, you can kind of have more justification for those restricted versus unrestricted dollars.
Absolutely.
Kind of thing. So good. Interesting. I just was curious, because it's really kind of picking up a lot of momentum in the nonprofit sector, especially with folks that get grants and things like that. So it's interesting. So as we're kind of going to start wrapping up, we're going to do a little Q&A. I know a couple people had to log off. Thank you, Julie, for joining us. Tim, what's the best advice you've ever been given?
Well, that's a tough one. I would, personal advice or professional advice?
Yeah, either.
I would think the best thing that I've ever heard is that you don't have to be the best. You just have to be your best. And I actually think that applies to us professionally, but also, to your audience, that you don't have to be providing the best service in the world, as long as you're passionate about it and you're serving an important need. I think that's the most critical.
Thanks. That's great. Well, let's do a little Q&A. Tim's going to sit in with us. Thank you, Tim, by the way, for taking time. Tim might be one of the busiest guys I know in all of the area that we are at. The guy one day is in LA and San Diego and Imperial Valley, and if you know California, we're not a small state. So I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule, and thank you for Wells Fargo's commitment,
Thank you.
Not just locally but nationally. So I would encourage you to pursue those corporate partnerships. We talked about in the beginning that even though they're not. Your most powerful asset's going to be your individuals. That's the bottom line. But your corporate partnerships are also going to be, very valuable as well. So kind of find that balance. So Lisa, Lisa's question's a little like that. Lisa, I'm going to read your question and hope to I can answer it correctly. Lisa, I'm just getting a Christian ministry nonprofit off the ground. Congratulations, by the way. In May and June of this year, I have the unique opportunity to be part of two faith-based university communities and also a vacation community, West Palm Beach. The one university is in Ohio, where I am pursuing my master's in theology and Christian ministry. The other is my alma mater, Notre Dame, where I'm participating in a summer program. My question is, who should I approach on these university campuses how in order to secure corporate partnership funding and support? Also, how do I approach relatives like my brother on West Palm Beach? Okay, so the short question for me is going to be is that universities, especially larger ones, actually have a corporate and foundations office. They actually have a corporate foundations relations officer. Believe it or not, that was a title of mine when I worked before I came to Aplos. So, and if they don't have that, then if you approach they all have a development department of some kind.
Yes.
So my for Lisa, for you, I would say contact their foundation or development department and have a conversation. Absolutely. In terms of your relatives, I would say, I don't, how well do you know them? But, the biggest thing for me is all about storytelling. What are you passionate about? If you want someone to be involved in a cause that you care about deeply, then tell them a story. Tell them what it means to you.
Yeah. You mean, is that for a relative?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Can I speak on
please,
that?
Yeah, please.
Just, and it may be connected. It may be not perfectly connected, but you might know that we recently started a giving circle here in the Central Valley. This was for the Latino population, asking folks to invest $1,000 each. And we started small with just a couple members, and now we have over 80 members, and we have raised about 110,000. But my brother, I was trying to get him recruited to the Giving Circle, and he was under the impression that he already gives to his church, his school. Why give to yet another cause? And he believes in supporting family before charity, all this other stuff. And so bringing him and introducing him to some of the folks who were involved, who make a lot less money than he does, and they're still giving $1,000, and really connecting him to the greater cause, which is to raise money so we can give strategically as a group and leverage each other's giving. That was sort of the selling point for him. So not sure if it applies in her case, but certainly getting her brother connected to the cause directly is a big selling point.
Great. And a huge point on that one for me is that, it doesn't have to be a huge gift to make an impact, collectively kind of thing. And that's what I'm really enjoying about this giving circle here locally. And I'm sorry, I'm going to try to say your name right. Otakar, are U.S. corporations looking for international impact? Question. And then what's the ratio compared to looking for domestic impact? The second part of that I can't answer. The first part I think I can. Do you want to go first, Tim, on that, or do you have any thoughts on?
Go ahead.
I mean, I would say yes. I do think there are a lot of corporations that are looking for international impact, partly because they are international, especially technology companies and world distribution. The oil and gas companies are huge in other parts of the country. Anywhere where there's a large American population serving, they want to impact there as well. So a lot of environmental groups, who are doing huge work. So I would say yes. I would identify them and based off the match of your organization. So if you are a literacy or whatever it is you represent, I would say look at their guidelines and go from there. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well said, Dan.
Okay.
Well said.
I don't know about the financial institutions like internationally where they're at.
No, we have team members that are in other countries, but right now the majority, the great majority of our dollars are here in the U.S.
Great. What kind of form? This is from the same person, the same Otakar. What kind of formal credentials and or referrals is Wells Fargo looking for from small nonprofits? My guess is what you're referring to there is I think you have to have a
501c3.
Okay.
501c3. We used to be able to fund 501c6 organizations through the foundation. We can no longer 501c3, and we can no longer accept fiscal agents. So it needs to be, the organization that is receiving the money needs to be the organization that is connected to the program.
Great. That's kind of how I read that too. And by the way, my contact information is right here on the screen. So if you have a follow-up question that we did not address correctly or didn't read that right, feel free to email me. I get a lot of questions following our webinars. I'm happy to talk with you further about some of your nonprofit questions and all of that. So Dr. J.E. Carthron, being a small nonprofit, what ways would be great to make donors feel comfortable about giving? would you recommend a bank trustee to oversee the funds and release them according to instructions? Thank you. So I'm going to take the first one, which is, I would say the in terms of making donors feel comfortable, I would think just having them get to know your organization, steward them, invite them. I think one of the great missed opportunities are tours of your organization and or opportunities to get people together and just tell some stories. And don't even ask them for money then. Just leveraging what it is you do around folks.
Right. Well, no, that's exactly it, Dan. And I think critical even for small organizations is to have a board of directors set up. Even if it's not 14 people, maybe it's 6 individuals, because it at least shows funders that there are 6 other people who believe in the cause and also have fiscal oversight responsibility for the organization, to know that, it gives possible funders that knowledge that, that everything's above board and legitimate.
Great. And the second part of that question is, would you recommend a bank trustee to oversee the funds and release them according to instructions?
No.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I don't. I wouldn't recommend that. I think building that relationship and that trust, and also being able to have, like I said, even if it's a small board of others who vouch and who can attest for the legitimacy of the organization, and from there on start building the reputation from there. Yeah.
I mean, if you're a small nonprofit and you have a board, you should already have some kind of, trustee, treasurer in place. And we can certainly help you on the accounting software side of things. So reach out to me if you want more information about
Definitely
that.
A treasurer. Definitely appoint a treasurer that is that doesn't have any financial connections to the organization.
So Lisa said, thank you for the great answer. Thank you for that. Is it important to have these people those people who may have degrees in areas of expertise on the board, or is it more important to have the right people in regard to your mission who have some same vision? That's from Angela.
Great question.
Yeah.
You want to take a stab at it?
No, I'm going to let you go first, and then I'll finish it.
Yeah, that's a great question. I love that question. I believe that it has to be a combination of both. It needs to be, first and foremost, belief in mission, because they're going to have someone with great expertise who doesn't show up for meetings.
Yeah.
But I think if you have someone who's committed to the mission, the best boards are those that bring on folks with different expertise, especially those that the organization might need. I've been able to, for example, place some of our folks from HR into boards that need HR support, and they have someone there that can advise them. Attorneys are popular. Accountants are obviously popular. They usually get the role of bankers. Usually get the role of treasurer. Although we have some bankers who'd rather not have the treasurer.
Yes, yeah.
They'd rather do something around marketing and others. So I would say yes to bring on that different expertise. Yeah. But lead with the person's passion for the mission first.
Yeah, passion first. You cannot replace passionate. People are willing to give time. I would say time first, treasure and talent,
Absolutely.
After that.
And then to be crystal clear about the time, the requirement that needs to be met there. Yeah. The number of meetings per year, how long these meetings will take, where the meetings are going to happen. Because if you're in San Diego and you get a board member from Sacramento or from, Las Vegas, expect someone who might not be able to make the board meetings, unless there's someone who is mobile or has means and that sort of thing. Yeah,
great point. Tim, it's a little after 11. I'm going to ask Otakar if you would email me at the Dan Kimball that's on the screen there, because I want to follow up this last question you have, and so I think it'd be better if we just do that offline. So if you would do that. Want to thank each of you for taking time out of your busy schedules. Wish you all the best in your fundraising and corporate relations partnerships out there. Thank you, Tim Rios.
Thank you, Dan. And I just want to wish all your listeners the best of luck. And if they're doing something great for the community, to continue doing it. I think it's magnificent work, and we wish them all the best.
Great. And check out our website for more resources, information about additional webinars coming up. We've got some guests, some more special guests coming up soon, and other topics. So thank you all. And then we will have a recording of this available. So again, thank you all, and happy Tax Day.